At the beginning of the movie, a psychic named Seker arrives at Mira and Wisnu's house. They explain that their daughter Zora was diagnosed with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder in childhood and requires extensive therapy, but her IQ is above average and she can paint, sing, and dance. She has also been conversing with an imaginary friend named Wury, a pregnant woman. Mira recalls that their late housemaid used to know Seker's mother, but since her mother has passed away, she reached out to Seker for assistance. Just then, Zora descends the stairs, looking for something, and explains to them that she is playing hide-and-seek with Wury. Wisnu urges Zora to come and meet Seker, and when Zora goes to her, Seker asks if she can join her. Zora agrees but asks if she can see Wury, as no one else can see her, to which Seker asks, shall they try? Zora then leaves there, and Seker tells her parents that Zora's dark purple aura signifies she is an indigo child with a sixth sense like her. She explains that as Zora grows, she will start seeing and communicating with the unseen. Seker tells Zora that she can't find Wury, to which Zora says she neither, but she heard her sound over here. Suddenly, a noise from above startles Seker, and Zora asks if she hears it too. They quickly rush upstairs, looking for Wury, and Zora says she thinks Wury is in her bedroom. Seker enters the room and sees a painting of a pregnant woman, which makes her feel uneasy. Zora calls out to her, and Seker turns, only to see the door opening behind her. But before Seker can react, an unseen force pulls Zora inside. Seker and Zora's parents rush in as Wisnu breaks the door, finding Zora on the floor, with deep scratches on her stomach. Mira asks Wisnu to get the first aid kit, and Seker reveals an unseen being wants to possess Zora, to which Mira says she just wants her to be normal. Wisnu asks Seker if she can take away Zora's powers and make her forget her indigo child experiences. In 2023, Jakarta, Zora showcases her artwork in her gallery, expressing her emotions and hopes to touch people's hearts through her paintings, inspiring them to make the world a better place. She also shows them a sculpture made by Jending Wiogo, and they ask her if this is the famous sculpture whose lips are painted with the blood of a Javanese woman, and when nobody is around, it comes to life. Zora dismisses it as myth, though she admits the sculpture is stored in a cold room at night for preservation. Zora's fiancé Akse then arrives there, and she asks him about his meeting, to which he shares his company's construction plans in Surabaya. Zora supports his success, but warns against working with Ataviria due to ethics. She says she is tired of her family's corruption and doesn't want Aksa to follow their greed. Aksa reassures her and reminds her of their wedding in 5 months. But just then, Zora gets a worrisome call about her sister Ninda. Next, Ninda's teacher informs Zora that it has been 4 days since Ninda has declined to attend her classes, and she says that whenever she attempts to concentrate on studying, something is always on her mind. Additionally, she disclosed that someone had been haunting her every night, causing her distress, and she hadn't been able to sleep for the past 4 days. He also tells her that today, when a study tour bus was leaving from school, Ninda had tried to stop it. That night, Ninda reveals to Zora that she hears voices and sees people, including a blurry woman who calls out to her every night. Zora tells Ninda about the dangers of not taking her medication for schizophrenia, emphasizing that it could blur the lines between reality and imagination. However, Ninda insists it's all real and started on that day. The scene shifts to 1 year ago when the family was traveling together. Ninda wakes up and suddenly urges her dad to stop the car, leading to confusion. However, before they can comprehend her behavior, they meet with an accident involving a truck. Ninda tells Zora about dreaming of their accident before it happened, and since then, she's been seeing people. Zora suggests starting over, saying they have already moved house so that they won't be reminded of mom and dad. She says she knows it's hard, but they have to be strong. Zoya comes downstairs and discusses Ninda's issues with Aksa, who suggests he knows a psychic who can help them. She criticizes his irrationality, asking how long he'll stay this way, to which Aksa reveals the psychic was his dad's friend and admits his father's death still haunts him. Though others believe it was suicide, he doesn't, regretting never saying goodbye. Before leaving, he gives Zora a book and asks her to read it. Later that night, when Ninda comes downstairs to get water, the door to the backyard suddenly opens on its own. Perplexed, she cautiously walks towards that side to check outside, but finding nothing unusual, she shuts the door. However, as she turns to leave, someone calls her name and tells her she is behind her. Scared, Ninda turns and gets terrified seeing a ghostly woman there. Zoya rushes to Ninda upon hearing her screams, and Ninda frantically tells her that she saw a woman over there. Zoya quickly goes there to check the area, but finding no one there, she reassures Ninda that there is no one around. However, Ninda insists that it's behind her, and indeed, we witness the entity behind Zoya. Zoya goes outside to check, and to her horror, the entity reveals itself in front of her as well, frightening her deeply. Zoya decides to meet the psychic, who turns out to be Seker. She explains to them that people who can see beings from other worlds are called Indigos, and Ninda possesses this ability, as she has a different aura. She further reveals that Ninda also has another power called precognition, enabling her to see into the future. Axa asks Seeker what makes a person an Indigo, to which she responds that these abilities can be either genetic or non-genetic, noting that none of her children possess such powers. Skeptical, Zora decides to leave with Ninda, and when Axa tries to stop her, she calls it irrational and delusional. Axa insists that if Ninda is Indigo, Seker can help, but Zora confronts him about being Yudi's right-hand man in the hotel project, accusing him of choosing an unethical path for success. When they return home, Ninda says she wants to see Seeker again, but Zora dismisses Seker's claims as ridiculous and tells her to go to her room. Later, while watching the news, Zora is shocked to learn that the tour bus of Ninda's school has been involved in an accident, resulting in the deaths of 28 students. That night, Ninda is awakened by the sound of knocking on her door. However, when she goes out to check, she finds no one there. Puzzled, she returns to her bed, but only then the light on the balcony begins to flicker, and she gets horrified to see the entity lurking outside the window. Shaken, Ninda asks what it wants, to which it says, "You." Terrified, Ninda attempts to flee, but finds the door locked. Suddenly, she hears the demonic voice, and to her horror, the entity is now sitting on her bed. The entity gets up and advances towards her, prompting Ninda to close her eyes in fear. But when she opens them again, the entity is nowhere to be seen. However, it soon reappears at her feet. Hearing Ninda scream, Zora rushes to her room and discovers deep scratches on her stomach. Zora asks what happened, to which Ninda says someone is over there, and they all watch in horror as the door slowly swings before slamming shut on its own. Axa visits Ninda and Zora at the hospital, and Zora tells him that Ninda is fine now. Seker and Elma then come there, and Axa explains he asked them to come here. Seker asks if she can see the wound, and Ninda shows it to her. And when Seker asks, did she communicate with her, Ninda says she tried, but she attacked her. Elma suggests they should check the house, but she says it's not about the house, and asks Zora if she still has the scars on her stomach. Zora shows the marks, but recalls her mother attributing them to an animal attack. Seker then reveals that 17 years ago, Zora's parents asked her to examine Zora, because like Ninda, she was also an Indigo. However, they ultimately requested that she close Zora's third eye. Seker then shows Ninda the painting and asks if this is what the woman looks like. Ninda confirms, and Seker reveals that Zora used to call her Wury, the same entity that scarred Zora's stomach. She explains that Wury attempted to possess Zora before Seker closed her third eye, and now, the entity is seeking to enter Ninda's body. She explains that Wury targets Indigo children to take over their bodies permanently. Unlike typical possessions, Wury seeks to become human, and the scars on her stomach are her way of marking her, so she can possess her body the next time she comes. Elma asks Seker if she can close Ninda's third eye to stop Wury's attacks, but Seker says she can't, as Ninda's powers have developed, and it will be difficult to chase away a spirit who has returned. She then warns Ninda that Wury will return to possess her, and urges her to fight to not let her in. Elma worries that Ninda is too weak to fight alone, to which Seker says she will help, but her power isn't enough, so they will need help from Zora, and for that, she has to restore Zora's powers. However, Wury might target her again, just like in the past. The following day, gripped by fear, Zora's maid leaves the house, and when Axa offers to remain with her, Zora declines and tells him that she wants to postpone their wedding. As Zora enters the house, Ninda hangs an amulet on the door handle and explains it's from Seker to protect the house. Later that night, Ninda is alarmed to find that the protective amulet is broken. Suddenly, Wury calls her name, and Ninda freezes in terror as Wury appears outside the house. As Wury advances towards her, Ninda quickly rushes to Zora's room and locks the door, informing her that the amulet has been broken and Wury is here. Just then, someone attempts to open the door, and Ninda hides under the blanket in fear. Zora, however, gets up to investigate, but the door swings open, leaving her startled to find no one outside. Meanwhile, Ninda hears a sound and screams as she sees Wury next to her. Zora rushes to check on her, but Wury drags her out of the room. Panicked, Zora rushes downstairs looking for her and discovers Ninda hiding under the stairs with scratch marks on her leg. In a desperate bid to help her sister, Zora resolves to have her power restored, but Seker warns her that once the power is restored, it cannot be taken away again. Seker then begins the process of restoring her power, and during this, Zora witnesses the moment when she was born. She then watches Seker closing her third eye, and during this, Wury is revealed levitating above the bed, and Seker, who can see her, orders her to go away and never return. Wury attempts to attack Seker, but Seker overpowers her, making her vanish into thin air and leaving the house. Later, when Zora wakes up, she tells Ninda that she just remembers everything that happened. Axa informs her that Seker suggested they visit her house once she feels better, but just then, she receives a call from her assistant Wanda, who informs her about a crack in the painting that is slated to be sold. Zora rushes to the art gallery, telling Ninda she needs a moment to check, since a buyer is coming for a painting the next day. Upon inspecting the painting, she finds no cracks, but her attention is drawn to a man nearby. Politely, she informs him that they are closed for the day and suggests he return tomorrow. But when the man remains unresponsive, Zora approaches him, only to be shocked upon realizing that his reflection is missing from the mirror. Fear grips her as she turns back to the man, who reveals himself to be something inhuman. Terrified, she flees to escape the danger, but the elevators are non-functional. Desperate, she rushes to another exit, only to find the door locked. Frantically, she tries to unlock it, but realizes that the entity is slowly advancing toward her. As it gets dangerously close, she struggles with the lock in sheer panic. But just before it can reach her, she manages to open the door, dashes downstairs, and locks herself inside a storeroom. As Zora catches her breath, she hears a voice, and her attention is drawn to the sculpture in the room. Startled, as Zora looks carefully, its eyes suddenly open, startling Zora. The sculpture stands up, deepening her fear, and then it starts advancing towards her. Terrified, she retreats into another room and quickly blocks the door with a table. But just then, someone starts knocking, intensifying her fear. Suddenly, the door swings open, sending her into a panic, until she realizes it's Axa, Ninda, and Wanda. Next, at Seker's house, she explains that indigos act like magnets to the unseen. She says, now she will teach them to control their powers to conserve energy, especially against Wury. And since Wury destroyed the protective amulet, they must rely on their own strength and unity for protection. Later, Ninda asks Elma about Dafa, and she says he has been quiet since their dad died 2 years ago. She explains that their mother hid her psychic abilities from them, believing it is a burden not just to her, but also to the people closest to them. Seker's parents rejected her powers and kicked her out for being different. Until 2 years ago, she had to handle a case with her dad as her assistant. The scene transitions to Seker and her husband Anwar engaged in an intense exorcism ritual on a young girl named Nina, who is possessed by a powerful demon. The intensity of the possession becomes evident when the bed on which Nina lies starts levitating off the ground. Undeterred, they persist in their exorcism efforts with determination, causing the bed to fall to the ground. After a while, Nina wakes up and calls out to her mother, prompting her parents to untie her and assist her in getting up before leading her out of the room. However, as Seker and Anwar begin leaving, the light in the room flickers, and they realize that it's not over. Seker steps aside to check the room, but suddenly an unseen force seizes Anwar, lifting him into the air and despite Sekar's attempts to intervene and save him, the entity fatally crushes his heart, causing his chest to explode. Anwar died on the spot, and only then did Dafa and Elma found out about their mom, and Dafa thinks that being an Indigo is a curse. Sekar also shares the same ordeal with Zora, and tells her that the entity who killed Anwar was Satan, the most terrifying of all the unseen. Sekar describes Satan as deceptive and cunning, with the ability to control other beings and block their aura to remain undetected. Meanwhile, Ninda senses the entity's presence in the washroom. Fearful, she cautiously approaches and pulls back the curtain, only to find nothing there. Relieved, she closes the curtain and turns to leave, but Wury attacks her. Hearing Ninda's scream, the others rush to her help, and Axa breaks open the bathroom door, only to find Ninda suspended in midair. But they can see Wury holding her, who glares at them with fury. Reacting quickly, Sekar attempts to weaken the entity's power, and after a tense struggle, she successfully drives Wury away, causing Ninda to collapse onto the floor. Zora and Axa hurry to her, trying to wake her, while Sekar senses that Wury is still present. She rushes outside to confront Wury and tells Elma that Wury doesn't like them meddling. She demands Wury to come out and face her, but Elma calls out to her mother, and Wury suddenly leaps out of the window holding Elma, making her fall onto a fence, causing her immediate death. The next night, Dafa confronts his mother, asking if she is still taking care of them after losing her own daughter. He reminds her that when their father died, she left soon after to handle a possession case out of town. Sekar sits beside him and softly says that if she could trade her life to bring Elma and his father back, she would. She explains that becoming someone he can't accept was never her choice, and no one born with Indigo abilities ever wished for them, and it's a torture. Even now, she still questions whether this is truly the life of an Indigo, destined to lose the people they love because of their powers. She admits he was right. It is a curse before leaving there. Meanwhile, the doctor informs Zora that they couldn't diagnose Ninda's illness, and that she is now in a semi-coma. Sekar visits them, and Zora apologizes, but Sekar assures her it wasn't her fault, and that their focus should be on Ninda now. Zora then reveals that when Wury was holding Ninda, she looked at her, and she saw all of Wury's past. Sekar realizes this means she can see the past, and Zora says it's all connected to my family. Next, using her ability, Zora travels into the past, where she sees her grandmother telling her grandfather that Satan demands a pregnant woman, and Zora realizes that her grandmother was also an Indigo. Suddenly, Zora is teleported to a village, where she watches her grandmother stalking a 7-month pregnant Wury, and then she discovers that her grandparents captured Wury to sacrifice her to Satan in exchange for inexhaustible wealth for themselves and their descendants. Next, Zora's grandmother encounters Wury's ghost and tells Wury that she cannot live in her child's body because she is not an Indigo. Then, grabbing a knife, she declares, "You will never take over my body," before stabbing herself. She then collapses to the floor and dies, and Sekar tells Zora that Wury cannot possess a dead body. She can only possess the descendants of Zora's grandmother who are Indigos, and since Zora's grandfather and parents aren't Indigos, Wury is after her and Ninda. Sekar then realizes that Wury doesn't just want to possess a human body, she wants to have a baby, and if this happens, the world will become horrible. They move Ninda to Sekar's house so she can keep a closer watch on her. Sekar explains that they must let their power flow to keep Ninda strong, safe, and protected from Wury. Axa enters the room and tells Zora that she should eat while he stays with Ninda. As Zora eats, she suddenly senses a presence nearby that leaves before she turns to look. Thinking it's Axa, Zora follows the presence, only to encounter Aguz, Axa's father. Shocked, she asks if she can help him, and Aguz simply stares into her eyes, revealing a flashback from 2005. She sees Aguz witnessing her grandpa sneaking out late at night. Curious, Aguz follows him into the woods, only to be horrified as he watches Zora's grandpa worshipping Satan. Accidentally, Aguz makes a noise, drawing her grandfather's attention. He chases Aguz and knocks him down, and begins strangling him. And to ensure his secret remains hidden, he kills Aguz and hangs his body from a tree. Zora tells Axa that his father was here, and reveals the shocking truth that Aguz was killed by her grandfather because he saw him worshipping over the sacrificial offering buried in their backyard in Bogor. Sekar asks if Aguz said anything else, to which Zora replies, he said his death is proof of human greed, and if Aksa keeps living in that circle, it means he is living in the devil's circle. Sekar explains that a sacrifice can be destroyed if it directly confronts the spirit tied to it. This means they can banish Wury's spirit by destroying her remains. Aksa says he will go to Bogor to retrieve Wury's remains, and Sekar explains that the ritual of the deal with the devil begins at 11 p.m. That's why Wury keeps haunting Ninda. She adds that this ritual is always performed on the night of a full moon. She warns them that the remains must be brought back by 11 p.m., and they must destroy them before the full moon is covered. Otherwise, it will be too late. As Aksa sets out to retrieve the remains, he receives a text from Wury, urging him to either bribe the district head or start a fire near the area to push their project forward. But Aksa replies that he has quit both the project and the company, and that he won't stay silent about the corruption. Meanwhile, Sekar sees Dafa preparing for the ritual and tells him he doesn't need to go through with it, to which Dafa replies that he read Elma's diary, which details all of Sekar's cases, and insists that if he isn't here to help her, then who will? They then rush to Zora and tell her that Aksa just called that he'll be there in 15 minutes. Aksa, however, on his way back, meets with an accident. Dafa tells them that Aksa isn't answering his phone, and they realize it's almost 11 o'clock. Sekar warns Zora, don't let Wury in, neither into her nor Ninda. Suddenly, a strong wind rushes through the house, extinguishing the candles, and the lights begin to flicker. Wury then calls out Ninda's name, and Sekar tells Zora to stay focused. Otherwise, they won't be able to defeat her. After some time, Zora hears a noise and is terrified to see Wury right in front of her, and in an instant, she collapses. Sekar rushes to her side, trying to wake her up, but Zora suddenly opens her eyes, now possessed by Wury, and her body begins to move unnaturally before bending into a spider-like position. Sekar and Dafa watch in horror as Zora slowly stands, a chilling smile spreading across her face. Wury walks toward the mirror and stands in front of it before saying, I have been waiting for this. She then turns to Sekar and says, there is nothing else you can do. After that, she approaches Ninda and says, if only I could have lived in this body from the beginning, we would have been sisters, and I wouldn't have had to visit you. Finally, she approaches Dafa and says, I'm hungry. Go cook something for me. Dafa sets the food before her, but she catches his hand and insists he sit with her. Hesitant, he takes a seat, and looking at the plate, she says, my first meal in decades. She then eats the food and drinks the water, after which she turns to Dafa and says, there's another soul, far stronger than the one this body belongs to. She pauses before continuing. Zora's grandfather's fortune is mine now. I was once a poor farmer's wife, but this is what I truly deserve, not the ones who sacrificed me, nor their descendants. She tells him that she allied with the Satan, and this lord of hers has never left her. Meanwhile, it's revealed that Wury orchestrated Aksa's accident. However, Wury survives the crash and tries to call Sekar, but due to interference, their conversation is cut off. At that moment, Ninda wakes up, and Sekar quickly informs her that Wury has possessed Zora. However, she believes Wury hasn't fully taken over yet, meaning they still have a chance to expel her. But the longer Wury remains in Zora's body, the stronger her hold becomes, and they might lose. Wury tells Dafa that she doesn't like his mother because she keeps interfering. However, she admits that she likes him and says the Satan would be pleased if he joined them, especially if they had children together. Suddenly, she rises to her feet, startling Dafa. She traps him against the wall, leaning in as she whispers, let's create a new age. Meanwhile, Sekar tells Ninda to head to Bahari Street and help Aksa retrieve the remains. Dafa knocks Wury down, and Sekar rushes in to assist, and together, they force her onto the table. Sekar quickly presses her amulet against Wury's forehead, causing her to shriek in fury. Wury throws Dafa aside, and then, in a blind rage, she grabs Sekar by the throat and hurls her onto a glass table, shattering it on impact. Dafa staggers to his feet and swings a chair at Wury, but it has no effect. Unfazed, she turns to him, grips his throat tightly, and effortlessly hurls him aside, making him unconscious. Meanwhile, Ninda arrives at Bahari Street and finds Aksa, who tells her that bones are down there in the car. Dafa regains consciousness and sees Wury perched on the table. She says no one can force her out of this body and questions his treatment of her after she asks nicely. Suddenly, she lets out a monstrous roar, her voice distorted and filled with rage. In that moment, it becomes clear that Zora is fighting against Wury from within. Wury, however, says, "I'm stronger," but Zora responds, "You have no power." Wury then warns her to shut up, or Dafa will die because she doesn't need him anyway, as she can find another man to get her pregnant. She then begins to take full control of Zora's body, and after a while, her eyes turn completely white. Terrified, Dafa tries to flee, but she chases him. Before he can escape, she stabs him with a knife and hurls him aside. She then lunges at him to finish him off, but he dodges her attacks and runs. And as she lunges at him again, both of them fall from the balcony and lose consciousness. However, after some time, she opens her eyes and bends her body like a spider before slowly standing up. Meanwhile, Sekar wakes up and sees Wury grabbing a knife and walking toward Dafa to kill him. She quickly gets up and strangles Wury with her rosary, pulling her back. Furious, Wury struggles to break free, causing both of them to crash through a glass window. Wury quickly gets up and begins strangling Sekar, who desperately struggles to free herself. Dafa rushes to save his mother and pulls Wury back. Meanwhile, Ninda returns home and hurries to help Sekar up, who tells her to go and help Dafa. Ninda quickly runs to them and wraps the amulet around Zora's hand, urging her to wake up. Sekar rushes to perform the ritual and quickly takes out Wury's remains. Meanwhile, Wury hurls Ninda aside, and then she knocks Dafa. She then rushes to stop Sekar, but Sekar throws Wury's remains into the fire. This causes Wury to freeze in place before levitating above a table. Wury then leaves Zora's body, and Zora collapses onto the table. They all rush to check on Zora, who regains consciousness after a while. Dafa asks Sekar, "Is it over?" To which she replies, "We're too late, as the full moon is covered," and when he asks, "What will happen now?" she says, she doesn't know. Next, we see that they have put their grandparents' house up for sale, and Yudi has been arrested. Aksa and Zora now run an orphanage, and they also happily get married. After a few months, Zora becomes pregnant and is reading Elma's diary. Aksa reassures her, saying he doesn't care if their child is born Indigo or not. He will still love her. Just then, Zora notices Ninda passing by outside. Concerned, she goes to her room and asks if she just walked past, and Ninda confirms. Zora approaches her and asks what's wrong, to which Ninda says she had a dream of impending chaos, and she doesn't even know if they will be able to stop it. When Zora asks what she means, Ninda replies, "A dark age." It is revealed that Wury had wished to possess a human body and live as one. The devil granted her wish, but it was just a trick for the devil to plant himself in a human. If the devil enters a host's body, even for a moment, it can leave something behind. It is then revealed that Zora's grandmother's deal with the devil required her and her descendants to help it bring its children into the world in exchange for inexhaustible wealth. A hand appears on Zora's womb before the scene fades, and the movie ends here. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the chills, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a scare. Until next time, stay spooky.